We are glad you've joined us to hear this message from Center of Hope Victory Church. We have a vision to release the spirit of revival and to raise up and equip Holy Spirit-led believers to do the work of the ministry. We hope you enjoy the following message.
Sunday before Christmas, what do you have to preach on? Christmas. I mean, that's a given, isn't it? It's got to be something to do with Christmas. Anyway, I've had a different take on Christmas. I know when you just think of like Mary and Joseph, the turmoil they went through to start with, with the angel coming to visit them. I've never had an angel show up in my room and talk to me and lights, but it's got to be at least a little bit upsetting or put turmoil in your life. So both of them have these angels visit. Both of them are given messages that are kind of hard to accept. So they're both, in my mind, in a little bit of turmoil the whole time. And then you get to the manger scene. I mean, we always sing the song, Silent Night. They're also nice, joy. I often don't see Christmas as that little joyful, peaceful, wonderful time. I mean, it is nice, yes. But when I look back to the original Christmas, Christ's birth, I often don't see that peaceful time, silent night, hark the herald angels sing. It's so nice. But when you think about it, at least when I think about it, maybe you don't, but when I think about it, the first thing I think of is Mary and Joseph coming from Nazareth to Bethlehem. It's about 90 miles. And I looked up, they said a day's journey back then was considered 20, 30 miles. That was a day. So we're looking 4 days of walking for Joseph, Mary on a donkey. Now, she's pregnant by probably 8 months. So maybe they took an extra day or two. So we're talking maybe 4 or 5 days going through not a nice lush forest. They're going over dirt, sand, gravel, hills. It's going to be hot in the daytime. It's going to be dark, cold at night. Evidently, in those below freezing at night in that area is not uncommon. So hot days, cold nights. And I'm sure you're traveling. A lot of people are traveling. They've got things with them they're going to know they're going to get somewhere. They're going to have to stay somewhere. So they've all got money with them. Are there going to be robbers? I mean, it's got to be in their mind, we've got this money. What's more vulnerable to robbers than a pregnant lady? My goodness, they're going to give up everything just to make sure they don't hurt the wife. So it's got to be in their mind. Not that we're told anything happened to them, but it had to be in their mind. Walking along 4 or 5 days, hot days, cold nights, there's robbers, there's hills. It couldn't have been comfortable. And I've never ridden on a donkey, but I've ridden on a horse, and I can't imagine 4 or 5 days on a horse, let alone a donkey. I've seen them. Donkeys are kind of bouncy. And I mean, they had to be totally worn out when they got there. I mean, I don't care how much they had with them. In my brain, they were worn out. It would have been a long, hard journey. Okay, so that's them. They're done. Now let's turn to what Jesus did. Where was Jesus before he was born? In heaven. He was up in heaven. Isaiah 57:15 says, For thus said the high and lofty one that abides and inhabits eternity, whose name is holy, I dwell in a high and holy place. Jesus inhabits eternity in a high and holy place. Eternity, we always think of it as a timeless place. But, how can something be timeless? I know we say it's timeless, but something has to happen there. It's got to be time somehow. It's not like you're in a still picture, right? And in eternity, you're not like in a photograph where nobody ever moves. Things happen. So I understand times, but it can't be timeless. We think there's zero time. Something has to pass when we're there. So you got to think, what's the difference between the time up there and the time down here? Because there is, it's a different time. It's eternity. It's got to be a different time. It also talks about him being in a high and holy place. No, it didn't just say a holy place, a high place. Jesus came from a high and holy place. So he came from a high place, he came to a lower place. He abased himself, put himself at a spot lower than where he belongs. That's like a king saying, the king is, all this fancy stuff he's got on, he's got all these guards around. The king saying, you know what? I'm just going to go out with the common people and live with them for a while. How many kings do you know want to do that? I mean, if I was a king, I would say, no, I don't want to do that. I like my castle. I like this fancy food. I like everybody serving me. Jesus was in that high, holy place, and he said, you know what? I'm going to come down to this place where these other people are, where we are. It was, in my mind, again, I'm putting my mind into this. To me, that would have been a hard thing for him to do, to say, I'm going to come down to where they are. Not saying we're insignificant, but from where he was, he's coming down to where we are. Get back to timeless for a minute. Because I always wondered, we always say it's a timeless place, but stuff happens in heaven. So there's got to be time. So what is the time up there different from the time down here? And I heard somebody a week or so said that really caught me. And again, it's not a biblical definition or anything, but he said, time that we have here is simply a way of measuring decay. I mean, what's happening to the world? It's constantly in decay. Everything's in decay. Why do we measure? We measure, when we put time, we are measuring how much decay there is. And I kind of commented, that makes a little bit of sense. And he even put in, I didn't quite understand this, that we use atomic clocks because they run on decay of uranium or whatever they use in them. But the atomic clocks run, as most accurate clocks there are, run on decay. Time here measures decay. So not only did Jesus come from a place up here to a place down here, he stepped from a place where there was no decay to a place that was full of decay. I mean, to me, that, again, that's hard. Who wants to step into a place? I mean, going down is one thing, but to me, it's almost like saying, I'm going to step from my house, and I'm going to step into a place where I've got a blanket, I'm sleeping outside in the mud. I know it's not quite the same analogy, but to go from a place with no decay to a place that is all decay. I mean, it's not just coming down. So to me, Jesus did a thing that in my mind is almost unthinkable. He took the best place he could possibly be and decided to go, I won't say the worst place he could possibly be, but to a place that is totally opposite to the wonderful, magnificent place he had. He said, I'm going to do this and go down to their level, step into the decay that really he has never experienced. He's been in heaven. He's never experienced decay. So he's going to a place to experience something he's never experienced before. And it almost seems like the goal of time is for things to decay. There's so much decay in the world. So he stepped from eternity into decay, a place with no decay. So from a place with no decay to a place that's totally encompassed by decay. And why did he come? To conquer decay. That's why he came. I mean, you don't go to why do people go to places to fix things? Jesus came to a place of decay to get rid of decay. Because let's face it, I've always heard, what happens to your body the second you're born? It starts to decay. From the day you're born, things in your body go wrong. So he's coming to fix that decay. In Isaiah 9:6, it says, For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. The Father that exists outside of decay, outside of our time. He exists outside of decay. Now think about that for a minute. Heaven has no decay. I mean, in that way of thinking, if time measures decay, and that's a timeless place, it means there's no decay there. I mean, I can't even imagine no decay. Because if there's plants there, I mean, if there's a flower in heaven, does that mean the flower never dies? Does that mean trees never die? Like, do the leaves never fall off? I don't know. It just amazes me that in heaven there's no decay. It's perfect place. Okay, that's Jesus stepping down. And as soon as he stepped down in Luke, I think it is. But they talk about the angels in the field singing. Actually, it doesn't say the angels sang if you read it carefully. It says the angels announced. But anyway, if you go back to Job 38, it says, where were you when I laid the foundation? Now, this is God talking to Job. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if you have understanding. Who has laid the measure thereof, if you know, or who has stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened, or who laid the cornerstone thereof, where the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Now, there's a lot in the middle, but if you take the beginning of the first sentence and jump down to the last phrase, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth, when the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy? When God made the earth, what did the angels do? They sang and they shouted for joy. Now think about it. When Jesus was born, the angels came. Now, whether they sang or not, I don't know. It doesn't say they sang. It says, they might have sang as well. Who knows? But they sang and announced this. Now, again, I'm putting stuff in here that's not Bible, just the way I'm thinking of things. How early did the angels know they were going to do this? Did they know when they sang at creation that one day they were going to sing to the shepherds and announce when Jesus came? How early did they know? Now, my brain goes funny sometimes. I think they knew from the beginning. They sang for the creation of the world, and God says, you know what? You sang for creation. One day, you're going to announce the birth of my son, Jesus. And the angels are sitting there. Is it today, God? Is today the day? Is today the day? I can see them just getting more and more excited. And they're saying, is it today? Do I get to go now? Do I get to go and announce it yet? I can see them getting so excited. They were so excited at the creation of the world. They got to be excited when Jesus comes to save it. I mean, how much excitement was building up in them? And one day God comes to them and says, you know what, angels, today's the day. Go. And they say, yeah, okay, let's go. I can see them just saying, he says go, and they were just gone. Like those old cartoons where they've got, the thing is there, and all of a sudden the character's not there, and you just got this little line behind them. To me, that's what the angels did. And again, scriptural, that's not what it says, but it doesn't tell us. So I'm putting in what I feel happened. That's what I think happened. God said to the angels, time to go. And they went. And again, I don't know what that means in heaven when somebody goes. But anyway, they just went. They ran to announce. They were anxious from the day of creation for this day to come. However many thousand years you want to think that could be. They were finally dispatched to go and say, Jesus is coming to rid this world of decay, to get it out so we can have perfection again. And he will make it so there is decay, will still take us here, but we'll go to a place where there's no decay. And the angels were just beside themselves. They had the chance to go. Now, if you go to Micah chapter 5, verse 2, it says, but you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall come forth unto me, that is to be ruler of Israel, whose goings forth have been from old, from everlasting. Now again, because there's different translations and there's a little bit different wording. That was the King James. One of the Jewish translations, Hebrew ones I've got, says, yet out of thee shall come forth of me. Instead of coming to Jerusalem, coming out of Bethlehem, coming unto Bethlehem, coming out of Bethlehem, whose origins have been from old, from everlasting, from before the days of creation. Jesus was planned to come from Bethlehem from before the days of creation. It wasn't halfway through the earth's history, God says, gee, what are we going to do now? It was all planned from the beginning. That's why I think the angels knew right away, because it was all planned from the beginning. So the angels knew. That's why they were so excited to go. And even, how excited was Jesus? I don't know. Think about that for a minute. He's looking down on his creation. He's seen all these things go bad, all these things going wrong. And he's knowing one day, I'm going to go down. I'm going to change everything. How excited was he? Was he sitting there thinking, oh, yeah, one day I get to go down, I guess? Or was he sitting there waiting too? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? In my mind, he was excited as the angels to get this thing going. Bethlehem Ephrata. Bethlehem means house of bread. House of bread. Now, this really caught me when I looked this up. The word for bread, most Hebrew words come from our root word. The root word for bread is also the root word for struggle. Anybody see a connection between bread and struggle? Anybody ever made bread? You got to struggle to make bread. So there's a connection between bread and struggle. So it's not only the house of bread, it could also be the house of struggle. So it's not just a matter of this wonderful place, it's a place of struggle. Mary and Joseph struggled. I'm not saying did Jesus struggle, like in the sense of we would struggle, but was there a struggle in his mind of coming down? Because like I said, he's coming from up here, abasing himself below his status to come down here. He's coming from no decay to a place of decay. Was there some struggle in his mind? Again, I don't know. But to me, it would at least have to be something he would be thinking about, that these things would be going on. And there's also a passage, I didn't look up in the Mishnah, I took the gentleman's word for this one, a passage in the Mishnah, which is kind of the oral tradition of the Jews. So it's not something that's written down now, but originally it was just oral traditions were passed on and passed on. It leads to the conclusion that the flocks, which were pastured there, were destined for temple sacrifices. And accordingly, the shepherds who watched over them were not ordinary shepherds, but Levitical shepherds. So the shepherds that were in the fields weren't just shepherds. And the sheep just weren't sheep. They were the sheep for the temple sacrifices, and the shepherds were temple shepherds taking care of the sheep. Well, where do we get that from? Now, this is the quote from the Mishnah. It expressly forbids the keeping of flocks throughout the land of Israel, except in the wilderness. And only flocks otherwise kept would be those for the temple service. Bethlehem's not out in the wilderness. Sheep had to be kept out in the wilderness. They weren't to be around the cities, out in the wilderness. So how far away were these shepherds? It says they came right away, so they couldn't have been 20 miles away. They had to be right beside Bethlehem. Well, that means they weren't out in the wilderness. They weren't just ordinary sheep. They were the sheep that were used for temple sacrifices. The shepherds were the ones who took care of the sheep for the temple sacrifices. So when we say the shepherds showed up, we see shepherds with sheep. They weren't just shepherds with sheep. They were the temple priests bringing the temple sacrificial lambs with them. I mean, that blew me away when I heard. I'd never heard that before. I mean, I've read that Christmas story hundreds of times. But to know that probably these were temple priests bringing sheep that were destined to be sacrificed in the temple. Now, we know they were close because, if they either had to leave the sheep and walk without them, or take the sheep with them. If they were a long way, they couldn't leave the sheep alone. They had to bring them with them. And even if they're close, they wouldn't leave the sheep behind because they were the shepherds. They had to bring the sheep with them. So they brought these sacrificial lambs with them. And in Micah 4:8, just before that last passage, it says, O you, O tower of flock, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion, unto you shall it come, even the first dominion, the kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem. The tower of the flock is called Migdal Eder. It's about one kilometer from Bethlehem, right outside Bethlehem. This is where they think the sheep came from. And evidently there was these towers out in the place. And out in the wilderness, evidently, they built these towers so the shepherds could get up above the ground to see where the sheep were. I mean, if you're trying to look at sheep and they're all over the place, you can only see so much. You got to get up higher so you can see over the ground. And evidently, throughout Israel, there were these towers where they kept the sheep so they could see where the sheep were. But in this place, Migdal Edgar, which is just outside of Bethlehem, there's more towers than anywhere else. Why do you need more towers? Because you want to make sure these sheep are kept safe. These just aren't sheep. These are the temple sacrificial lambs. And what did the temple sacrificial lamb have to be? Perfect. You couldn't have a lamb that lamb's got a broken leg. That one's no good. Well, if they're out in the wilderness, they're going to fall. They're going to get hit. All sorts of stuff's going to happen. But they still have the tower to watch over them. But if you want to make sure your sheep don't get hurt at all, you've got all sorts of towers. You're watching them the whole time. And evidently here there's towers, and they could see the lambs to make sure nothing happens to them. And Eder, Migdal means a tower. Eder means a flock. But it's the flock in a sense of things being removed from what is unnecessary to bring about order. Like you got a flock of sheep. You don't just let them run anywhere. I mean, when they're grazing, yes. But if you want your flock of sheep to go somewhere, you get them together. You remove them from what is unnecessary so you can bring about order within the group. What was a temple lamb being prepped for? He was being taken away from what is necessary to bring about order, so when he goes to the temple, proper sacrifices can be done. The Passover lamb would be removed to bring about order. Now I got ahead of myself here. Now I'm on the piece where all the towers are. The lamb. Now again, some of these Hebrew words just fascinate me. The word lamb, obviously, is a noun. It's related to a verb, which means to place or lay down. The sheep purpose is to be placed somewhere or to lay down. Now, when it was time for the temple lamb to be sacrificed, what's the first thing the priest had to do? Say yes. Inspect it. He had to say, this had better be a perfect lamb because it's not a perfect lamb. You can't use it. So the first thing they would do was inspect the lamb. Then, once it was inspected, the shepherds or whatever would inspect and make it was perfect. You got to guess at this one. What do you think he did to the lamb first? I'll give you a hint. He wrapped it in swaddling cloths. Now, I read a few websites, and one guy I read said that's all a fairy tale. It's not true, but I looked to see what his website was about, and he's kind of against biblical stuff, so I put that aside. But I found many that said the temple priests, they would wrap the lamb up, because once it's ready, you certainly don't want anything to happen to it. So you wrap it in a swaddle. What was Jesus wrapped in? Where do you think they put this swaddled lamb until they were ready for it? On a concrete manger. They took the lamb, swaddled it, put it in a manger. Because it was going to be the temple sacrifice that covered the sins of those people for another year. What did they do with Jesus? They wrapped him in a swaddle and put him in a manger. He didn't just cover the sins for a year like the sacrificial lamb did. He was going to take the sins forever. Like, to me, I know it's nice to, I love Christmas carols. Don't get me, I love I love Away in a Manger. It's such a nice song. But to me, it doesn't grasp what the Christmas story is. Okay, so those shepherds, they swaddled their lambs and put them in a manger. They go to where Mary and Joseph are, and what do they see? A baby swaddled in a manger. They knew the story. They knew what the temple priests were for. They knew what the sacrifices were for, and they see what's going on. Now, the birth was just the beginning of a journey. Now, this is where I won't say I struggle, but to me, the birth and the cross are one story. It's not like two parts of a story. They are so the same, I can't separate them in my mind. Because if there's no birth, there's no cross. If there's no cross, the birth is irrelevant. It's not really the birth. So to me, they are the same story hooked together. Not two different stories hooked together. It's the same, in my mind, it's the same story. The birth and the cross is one story. Death in Hebrew is securing, let me get this right, it's chaos secured by a promise. What was the promise in the Garden of Eden? Don't eat of any tree. If you eat from this tree, you will surely die. There's the promise. And death is the chaos that is secured by that promise. That's what death is. Now come to now Jesus saw the cross at the end of the journey. In the Old Testament, it says he would be hung on a tree. Tree is two letters. It means to see a journey. But then I got this next one blew me away. The cross. The cross does not occur in the Old Testament. So there was no Hebrew word for cross. So I looked up the modern day Hebrew word for cross. Cross or a crucifix. They have an actual word for that in Hebrew. 3 letters. Tzada, Lamed, Bet. Tzada is a trail or a journey. Lamed is a shepherd's staff. And what does a shepherd do with his staff? Urges the sheep along. Bet is your house or your home. Put those together. The cross is where the shepherd is leading us home. That's what the birth is. It's the shepherd coming to lead us home. On the trail, the path of the shepherd is the path of the shepherd taking us home. That's what the birth is. The birth isn't, it is. It is a nice little story, baby in a manger, way in a manger, silent. It is all those. But I can't separate the birth from the cross. It's to me, they are so entwined you can't separate them. So the birth of Jesus is the path of the shepherd leading us home. What? How can you not, how can you not get teary with that? What he did, he went from no decay to a place of total decay. A place where he is high and holy to a place where he is way, way below his status. Why? So he could, as our shepherd, take the path to lead us home. Yeah. The whole point of the birth is to get us to the cross. Yeah. So anytime, Christmas time, I know it's another week away, but think of it as, that path. Sometimes I get them out of order. It's the path the shepherd is leading us along to get us home. It's not just a cute little baby in a manger. It is, I know. It's nice to say that, but anyway. Lord, we thank you that you did step out of your eternal, perfect place to step down beneath your status to a place where there's decay, a place where things go wrong, but you step down to that place so you could lead us along that path to our home with you in eternity. Amen. Amen.
We hope you enjoyed this message. For more information about Center of Hope Victory Church, please visit centerofhopevictory.com.